Essay number 98, The Power of Negative Thinking. Let me tell you something that's going to completely change how you see your problems. Whatever problem you think you have right now, the relationship that's falling apart, the job you hate, the anxiety that won't leave you alone, that's not actually your problem. Your problem is that you don't know how to think about your problem. I know. You're sick of platitudes. You're tired of being told to think positive or change your mindset or whatever else the self-help industrial complex is selling this week. But this isn't that. This isn't some feel-good nonsense you can ignore. This is the fundamental truth about how your brain works. And ignoring it is like ignoring gravity. You can pretend it doesn't apply to you, but you're still going to fall. The point of experiencing anything, is learning how to think about it differently. When you don't do this work, when you don't learn to think differently, you become stuck. You keep having the same problems, the same reactions, the same patterns over and over again. Think about it. The more experiences you have, the more lenses you have to see the world through, the more dimensions you can think in, the more possibilities you can conceive of. That's what real education is. Not learning what to think, but learning how to think. But here's where we've gone completely wrong. We've been taught that negative thinking is the enemy. Every self-help book, every motivational speaker, every pop psychology article tells you to ignore negative thoughts. Push them away. Replace them with positive ones. Think happy thoughts. Good vibes only. This is bullshit, and it's dangerous bullshit. Learning to ignore negative thoughts isn't learning how to think. It's learning how to dissociate. It's learning how to disconnect from reality. It's learning how to become numb to your own internal guidance system. Your negative thoughts are information. They're data. They're messages from parts of you that need attention. They inform you just as much as positive thoughts do, maybe more. When you feel anxiety about a situation, that's information. When you have negative thoughts about a relationship, that's information. When pessimistic scenarios play in your head, that's your brain trying to protect you, prepare you, guide you. The problem isn't having negative thoughts. The problem is not knowing what to do with them. The ancient Stoics understood this. They practiced something called negative visualization, deliberately imagining the worst possible outcomes, not to torture themselves, not to manifest disaster, but to prepare, to remove the fear of the unknown, to realize they could handle whatever came. They understood the power of negative thinking. Because here's what negative thinking actually is. It's your brain's way of problem solving. It's your mind running simulations. It's your consciousness exploring possibilities. It's your intelligence working exactly as it's supposed to. The solution isn't to become relentlessly positive. The solution is to become consciously aware of how you're assigning meaning to your thoughts. Let me get nerdy for a second. Your prefrontal cortex, the evolved part of your brain, has this incredible ability. It can think about thinking. Psychologists call it metacognition. Your brain can observe itself. This is why you know when you're angry, why you can recognize when you're afraid, why you can identify when you're sad. You have awareness of your own mental states. Without this awareness, you wouldn't know to run from danger. You wouldn't know to seek food when hungry. You wouldn't know to connect when lonely. The feelings would be pointless without the awareness of what they mean. But here's the crucial part. Your prefrontal cortex can also choose to ignore your emotional brain when it determines there's no real threat. When your amygdala is firing because someone didn't text you back, your prefrontal cortex can say, "This isn't actually dangerous. This anxiety isn't based on real threat. I can ignore this signal." When your emotional brain is catastrophizing about a presentation, your thinking brain can say, "This fear is disproportionate to the actual risk. I can acknowledge it without being controlled by it." This is the power of negative thinking, not avoiding negative thoughts, but thinking about them intelligently. The difference between anxiety that paralyzes you and fear that accompanies bravery isn't the feeling, it's discernment. It's your ability to think about the feeling and decide what it means and whether it matters. The difference between people who are crushed by obstacles and people who turn obstacles into opportunities isn't optimism. It's the ability to think about negative situations in useful ways. Because here's what discomfort does. It forces you to think of options you wouldn't have considered otherwise. When everything's going well, you don't innovate, you don't grow, you don't explore. Why would you? There's no pressure to change. But when things go wrong, when negative thoughts arise, when discomfort appears, that's when you're forced to think differently, to consider new possibilities, to find solutions you never would have looked for if everything had stayed comfortable. This is why heartbreak is crucial to human growth, why failure leads to success, why the obstacle becomes the way. Any idiot can enjoy positive experiences. That takes no skill, no intelligence, no growth. But taking negative experiences and finding something profound in them, that's mastery, that's wisdom, that's evolution. Your negative thoughts aren't your enemy, they're your teacher, but only if you learn how to think about them correctly. When you have a negative thought, don't push it away. Don't replace it with a positive one. Don't pretend it's not there. Instead, think about it. What is this thought trying to tell me? What information is it conveying? What problem is it trying to solve? What danger is it trying to avoid? Is this thought based on reality or fear? Is it proportionate to the situation or exaggerated? Is it helpful or harmful? Is it actionable or just noise? This is thinking about thinking. This is metacognition. This is the power of negative thinking. Because once you can think about your negative thoughts intelligently, something incredible happens. They stop controlling you. The anxious thought is still there, but you're not anxious about being anxious. The sad thought still occurs, but you're not depressed about feeling sad. The fearful thought still arises, but you're not paralyzed by fear. You see the thought, you assess its merit, you decide what to do with it. You're in control, not because you've eliminated negative thinking, but because you've learned to think about your negative thinking. This is what emotional freedom actually looks like. Not the absence of negative thoughts and feelings, but the ability to experience them without being controlled by them. Because negative thoughts and feelings will arise. That's not a bug in the system, that's a feature. They're part of your guidance system, your problem-solving apparatus, your growth mechanism. The problem is never the problem is how you think about the problem. That breakup that's destroying you. The problem isn't the breakup, it's that you're thinking about it as an ending instead of a redirection. That job you hate. The problem isn't the job, it's that you're thinking about it as a trap instead of a temporary situation you can change. That anxiety that won't go away. The problem isn't the anxiety, it's that you're thinking about it as something wrong with you instead of your system trying to tell you something needs attention. When you learn to think about your problems differently, the problems themselves transform. Not because the external situation changes, but because your relationship to it does. This isn't positive thinking. This isn't negative thinking. This is intelligent thinking. This is conscious thinking. This is the kind of thinking that actually changes your life. Your negative thoughts are not your enemy. They're half of your intelligence. They're the part of you that sees problems, identifies threats, recognizes patterns, and pushes for change. Without negative thinking, you'd be delusional. Without the ability to see problems, you couldn't solve them. Without the capacity for dissatisfaction, you'd never grow. The power of negative thinking isn't in the negativity itself. It's in your ability to think about the negativity intelligently, to use it as information, to let it guide you toward what needs attention, change, or acceptance. Stop trying to be positive all the time. Stop pushing away negative thoughts. Stop pretending that half of your human experience is wrong or bad or something to be fixed. Start thinking about your thinking. Start using all of your intelligence, not just the happy parts. Start recognizing that your negative thoughts are trying to help you, if only you'd learn to listen correctly. Because when you finally understand that the problem is never the problem, that it's always about how you think about the problem, everything changes. Not because your problems go away, but because you finally understand what they're for. They're not punishments. They're not failures. They're not signs that something's wrong with you. They're invitations to think differently. They're opportunities to grow. They're your own intelligence trying to evolve you into who you're supposed to become. The power of negative thinking isn't something to fear. It's something to master. And mastery begins with a simple recognition. Your negative thoughts aren't the problem. Not knowing how to think about them is. Now you know. What are you going to do with that knowledge?